Welcome, everybody, to a very special episode. I have my work wife of the last 8 years, Scott Mullen, that I worked with at my last company, Airhouse, and we're starting something new. Welcome, Scott. I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Why do you continue to work with me? And also maybe a little bit of like your background.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I'm Scott. I have been in the software industry for 21 years now. Been all over the place, started in aerospace, been around doing mobile stuff, doing real estate stuff, all over the place. And yeah, so you and I met now 6, 7 years ago in the Airhouse world
Yeah.
at a weird time in my life, able to come in on the ground floor. I've been in the startup scene now for 11 years, been interested in the startup journey and trying to figure out what that looks like for everybody. So moved out to the Bay with big dreams and yeah, so found Airhouse and was really excited to build from the beginning. And for me, meeting the right team with the right vision is
Yeah.
so important. And I have such a clear memory of the first time we met
Yeah.
and you talking through the vision and the business plan and what Airhouse was going to be about and just being so excited, walking out the door and riding down the elevator, being like, man, what a cool
Cool guy.
opportunity. What a
Cool
cool
guy to work
team.
with.
What a suave guy. And yeah, a great journey. I think so many things that we did right, so many things that we learned. But yeah, and why do it again? You made a good impression on me from the beginning. And I think your version of crazy matches my version of crazy in a cool way
Yeah.
to just no fear,
Yeah.
lots of guts.
Yeah. So for everybody listening here, this is a different episode. So we don't have the regular guests on here. I wanted to do this with Scott, my co-founder of this new company that we're starting, and wanted to really cover two things. For anybody who has been following this podcast or myself or just our last company in general, Airhouse, wanted to dissect like why, for one, why do we start Airhouse? For two, why didn't it work? And then for three, why, and we're going to be a little vague on this, obviously, but what are we starting and new? And also, Scott is, I hired him as engineer first, and we've got to know each other over the years. And now he's co founding this company with me. So I don't know. I love to, I'm, I'm a very big optimist. I love, Scott, your kind of realist view of what Airhouse was, why you decided to join it, what problem you saw that we would solve differently, and then we take it from there.
Yeah, I remember the story you told, right, with the end of Shyp and sort of this underserved segment of the direct consumer space,
Yeah.
small brands looking for help with logistics and not really being able to navigate it as a small kind of emergent business. And that's where we started, right? Our first customer at Airhouse was tiny. I remember going through that water filters, right? And figuring out what the market segment was obviously one of the kind of ongoing challenges there, but just the idea of serving a segment of the community that was underserved in a developing market. And yeah, I think that logistics is a older industry and
Yeah.
there's a lot of big players that have been doing the same thing. I remember meeting some of the first companies that we talked to at Airs that have, been in business for 70, 80 years or whatever,
Right.
and a little bit behind the times technologically. And
Yeah.
you look at something like that and you see an opportunity, right? That's the startup playbook of find an industry that is not technologically forward, apply a little Silicon Valley magic to something like that. So there's definitely something there. At my point in my career, I want to work with people I want to work with
Right.
too. And it's a complete picture, right? You meet the team, and I met the whole company at Airhouse when I joined Sam. It was like Sam's first day, I think. And
Yeah. He was our first
uh,
engineer. Yeah.
yeah. And my interview with him was just like worked for an hour on some stuff. And so we just brainstormed some stuff and came up with some ideas. And it was great. I loved Sam. I loved working with him. and then meeting with you and Sarah and just talking through the vision and the plan. And I always, my background tends towards something kind of concrete. I want to know
Yeah.
what the strategy looks like. What is the plan? And it shouldn't
Right.
just be like, oh, we're just going to have some fun and figure it out. And so having a strategy and again, the team, like I really enjoyed meeting the team. And yeah, I knew what I wanted to build from the first day and I
Right.
knew what we were doing. And when I have a clear path, I can get marching down that path. And so
Yeah.
that felt great.
Yeah, and so for everybody that is not aware of the Airhouse story, it was really going off the backs of Shyp. So Shyp was a consumer shipping service. We come to you, pick your items up, we take it back to our warehouse. We operate our own warehouses, and that was painful. We didn't have uh, the frequency of use that you get from a DoorDash or an Instacart or something like that. And also we had warehouses. And so with warehouses, okay, there's a bunch of 3PLs. 3PL is something that will basically store, pick, pack, and ship your items out if you're a brand. And I was like, okay, what if we can roll up all of these 3PLs, but in a digital way? What if we can make the best marketplace? What if we could build the best experience for the brand, but then also weed out all of the shitty 3PLs on the back end? Scott, I'd love for you to talk about some of the early days of weeding out the shitty
Yeah,
3PL.
and not to leave out too, one of the things that I felt was really important about Airhouse's business model is it was supposed to be beneficial for the 3PLs as well.
Yes.
The idea
Yes.
is 3PLs, and I think this is a truism for all businesses. You focus on what you're good at. And so our pitch to a 3PL was you do 3PL and we'll be everything else for you. And early on in Airhouse, that's exactly what we were. And we
Right.
had a great support team. We were great at coming into customers who were early on in their sort of business journey and helping them understand logistics. And you had a ton of experience in logistics.
Yes.
And so we could walk in and we could help them understand how to be successful and grow their business. And that was a formula that was really working well for us early on there, right? We'd meet
Right.
these brands and we'd help them understand to go from shipping out of their garage when they're shipping 2 orders a day to something bigger. But it works for the 3PL too, right? They don't want to
Yeah.
have to deal with the customer service and answering the phones all day and sitting and doing emails and all this kind of stuff. So we could bridge that gap. We could be the
Yeah.
technology in between the two, and we could be the customer service that the hands-on customer service that an early brand needs. And so really beneficial for everybody. So it was more than just create a marketplace, create something that
Right.
everybody gets value out of. And I think that was something that really resonated for me. We're not making somebody suffer on one side of the equation in order to
Right.
benefit the other. Everybody should benefit in this relationship. Everybody sees the value there.
And also how our business model worked was we essentially had a take rate of 20%, which we were able to get that through consolidation, getting better rates with both the 3PLs because we brought them a ton of business, but also with the shipping carriers. And so the whole idea was it was a win-win. It's you are going to pay the same price as a brand if you went directly to a 3PL, and then you would get all of this awesome, you get this, and it turned into a global network. We also were in the UK and we were going to expand even further than that and all that, all through one platform. And then in the background, we would be monitoring like and having the best technology, like who who should you move your goods to? Or if you're a customer that is selling heavy equipment or something like that, we'd be able to pair you with the best person. And I think that like the early days, so Airhouse was around for 6+ years.
Your film.
Yeah, we did a really fantastic job at doing that. And we were number one 3PL. Technically we were 4PL, which means we're sit on top of a 3PL, but we were number one ranked in G2 ratings. Our NPS was like off the roof. We didn't have any churn. Like the early days, the first 5.5 years were really great. And then, Scott, what do you think happened after that?
Yeah, I think that we lost sight of the vision a little bit for sure. And I think that, and this is a symptom of a lot of smaller businesses, but also a symptom of a 3PL is you try to be kind of everything to everybody.
Hmm.
And we started taking on some customers that needed things that we didn't currently offer with the hope that we could figure out a middle ground there, some kind of a strategy there. And I think that we definitely lost some of the polish when we started trying to do things that weren't in our sort of
Right.
wheelhouse. So I think there's definitely an aspect of that. And then the sort of product market fit side of things where we were great for a particular type of company.
Hmm.
And we got a little ambitious, I think, and we wanted to go into a market segment that didn't need us as much as there's still the value. And I think, what you said about the way we had negotiated our contracts with 3PL still allowed for the pricing to be
Hmm.
competitive.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, if they don't need us as a sort of logistics partner, then we're just in the way of their relationship with the 3PL and a lot
Hmm.
of these bigger brands with their own logistics departments
Hmm.
and their own
Hmm.
ideas of how they want things to work. We're just and somebody in the way rather than what they didn't want that partnership. And so I think, yeah, we were playing around in a market that we hadn't really figured out yet. And I think that and it's only half the picture, right? Because we also learned that the smaller brands were disproportionately needy in terms of the customer service stuff. And so we were putting a lot of strain on our customer service team to try and support these smaller brands. And so that was a challenge and that was a lesson learned through the business as well. But we tried to do a lot and we tried a lot of things. And I think one of the takeaways that I learned that I think is going to be important to our success here is we got to learn our lessons faster.
Yeah.
I think that we would have conversations about what was going on, what wasn't going well, and try to continue on and hope that things would get better. And hope isn't a business strategy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so I think there were some opportunities to make adjustments that we did not take. And
Yeah.
so,
It's really hard when you're really marching forward and also you have so many positive signals, right? Like I remember it was so many quarters that we wouldn't ever churn, like literally we didn't have any brands that would churn.
yeah,
And so it's really hard. And then we'd also be bringing on so many customers. And then also we would be getting interest from a lot of larger brands, which also like you got to be careful about that. And that was definitely a mistake to follow that. But it's really hard when things are going relatively well. It's hard to really look back and think and like change things in a fundamental way. And I'm really proud of the service we provided our customers. But I think that the overall model just doesn't work. And so for anybody here that is in the 3PL business and hates 4PLs, this will be good for you. I think the 4PL model is very flawed in that you are basically managing a bunch of different 3PLs. And one of the things that 3PLs have are humans. So you have if you're working with a very large 3PL, like we worked with the largest ones in the world, Seco, they do $6 billion worldwide in revenue. And we are also working with smaller ones, which I'll let them remain nameless. And you could have somebody from the top that loves what you're doing, but then when you really drill into it, it's like it comes down to like the GM or the actual supervisor that's managing the picking process, or like how big of a customer are you to them? And they'll prioritize larger customers over smaller customers and all this. And it's kind of one of the things that was really tough for us was when we started to see that our performance, and we measure this on a KPI basis as far as the number of orders that are going out on time, number of purchase orders, which is like an incoming order from a supplier that are actually coming on time. When we see that degrade, And then we started to see the churn. And so coming out of that, it was like, I remember like early on, it'd be like on the East Coast, we would have, oh, the whole management team is turned over and they're getting a new management team. And it would be 6 to 8 weeks before we would be yelling at this 3PL that we would be working with a lot of other sites that was working relatively well, but but our customers that were in those actual locations were like, our stuff's not going out on time. Like you guys are completely fucking up. You're
Yeah.
sending stuff in the wrong, like literally like the wrong customers' orders, and that's where I think the fundamental 4PL model when you have to deal with humans ultimately breaks down.
It was a weird relationship, right? Because we weren't the customer. And so we're talking to the 3PLs and we're trying to convey urgency. And obviously our customers are giving us we're receiving a lot of pressure from our customers. We're trying to manage the relationship on the 3PL side. And both sides really wanted to talk to each other at that point, especially with the
Yeah,
larger
they
customers.
did.
They just want to be on the phone with somebody in the building who can say, remember they had a freight elevator was broken at one point and was broken for a month and all these problems because they had goods that they had trouble moving around within the facility. And it's just at the end of the day, those customers just needed to talk to somebody in the building and we were just in the way. And those are the kinds of relationships where we ultimately weren't quite the fit that they needed. But and then another thing to rewind back to something else you were saying with
Yeah,
these larger 3PLs with multiple sites, the individual sites were really operating autonomously. And so we'd run into a
that's
lot
right.
of issues where we had a great relationship with one site and then we're trying to build a relationship with a new site and you're starting from scratch. You're not just adding another site. You're meeting a whole new team that has a whole new tech stack sometimes, has a whole new set of requirements and SOPs, and so you're starting over. You're practically meeting a new 3PL practically. And so
Hmm.
that was unexpected, I think, with the different 3PL partners that we had. Some of them did it better than others. You mentioned Seco. Trying to expand the partnership with Seco, we had a great relationship with the one site, and then we wanted to
Yeah.
add another site, and we were starting over. We had no, I mean, they had a different
They had
WMS system, right? It was
eight
literally everything.
different WMS systems, which is basically their operating systems within the US.
Yeah. And even, early on in Airhouse, we had one 3PL, one building that had 7 or 8 WMS systems just in their one building
Yeah.
because of all the partnerships and stuff going on there. And trying to navigate that even within one building, it wasn't possible. And I think we had learned that lesson early on with that particular site. But yeah, just a lot of complexity there that I don't know. It surprised me from being somebody that didn't really know much about the industry when I came into our house, but just a lot of kind of fragmentation, a lot of people not really communicating.
Which I think would be okay if you're actually just dealing with different WMS or any different systems and you're an aggregator and you can smooth out all the things. But the problem really became really evident when you had to also deal with the humans, right? You had to deal with the humans that are also dealing with these different WMS systems. And you had to also deal with the returns that were completely like outside of the system and in Excel spreadsheets and all that. I don't know if you want to talk about
Yeah.
that type of thing.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of processes, and I think that those are the organic processes that grow from the symptom of taking on saying yes to everything. So somebody says, I want to ship kayaks, and they sign that
Hmm.
deal. And then the warehouse manager gets a memo that says, hey, figure out where to put kayaks. And they've got standard racking, and now they got to go figure out where to put a bunch of kayaks. And so they buy some new racking and they set aside some space and they try to figure out whatever it is, but their WMS system doesn't support. I'm just making stuff up, but it's like
Hmm.
you create a scenario where it doesn't quite fit the mold, and then you try to figure out how to make it work. And so now you've got some weird new process that involves some spreadsheet that some guy manages, and he has to remember to send that over to the billing guy. So he remembers to do that extra thing. And it just becomes this big process billing's a little bit of the sensitive subject
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
Airhouse world. We'd have situations where we'd be 6 months waiting to finalize a set of bills.
Yeah.
And another scenario where our customers are yelling at us and we're yelling at the warehouse, and we're just in the way because at the end of the day, they're waiting for something or other to finalize, and we're trying to communicate that to the customer. And
And they're
those
blaming
were,
us.
yeah, and rightly
They
right.
should be.
They signed their contract with us, and we made it our responsibility. But I think that the level of urgency didn't always translate. Our customer service team, with the absolute hearts of gold, putting up with
Amazing
all
team.
kinds of nonsense, with
Team.
the customers saying some pretty awful things even, and trying to do our best to help them understand and coach them along. And that's where an early brand, they trusted us, and they would listen to what we would say, and we would tell them what we were trying to do, and they would go, okay, I believe that you're doing your best here.
Hmm.
And then some of these bigger brands just feel like, I don't accept that. And then,
Hmm.
okay, like, you don't accept it, but nothing has changed here. We're
Hmm.
still trying to get these things figured out. And so, yeah, some complications of communication, but yeah, a lot of manual stuff. I remember we'd go through these things where when someone would ship a package, they would have to go into web interface and drop down, have a
Yeah.
little drop down selection. And then when somebody made a mistake in the drop down, result in a billing error. And then somebody on our team has to go chase that down. And it becomes this complicated situation where it didn't need to be. And
Yeah.
that's a simple thing that could be fixed. Status quo is often maintained, and while things are working fine,
Right.
they just continue on. And so they're just stuck with these processes, and it's nobody's fault on the floor, right? I mean, everybody's doing their very best, but it's a
Yeah.
tough job. It's a repetitive job. It's a boring job. Just clicking the same button all day over and over. It's not, it's not exciting work. It's not fulfilling work. And I'm excited as we kind of transition into talking about, what we want to do here is some of
Yeah.
that is removing some of the worst parts of the
Right.
3PL
Right.
industry and the 3PL jobs, the labor force and the type of work that people are
Right.
being asked to do in these warehouses, and making something better, making something more interesting, more cerebral, and less just mindless nonsense. So I think
Yeah.
that's a big,
Let's transition to that as far, and then for all of the avid listeners that want to hear what ultimately led to Airhouse's failure, we'll save that to the end. But I think that what me and Scott, we've now, the company that we've co-founded together, and it's called Cytronic, and we're aiming to, we are basically a 3PL, but we are a robotic first 3PL. And so we are inserting robots into the duties that a lot of the human labor that we saw, and to remove a lot of the, not only the day-to-day, like the temp labor that you would have to get on the 3PL, or also just managing a team, but also the GM's responsibility, and you take them away and now their operation goes to shit. We are trying to roboticize, robotic robotize this entire industry from the ground up. So we call it greenfield versus brownfield, versus because we are going robots first versus trying to look to put some robots within an existing organization. And the whole premise here is that we are going to be cheaper, we're going to be faster than any other solution out there. And ultimately, we are going to be taking on the behemoths, even as the Amazon FBA. We think that we actually have a good shot at that. And so that's what we're doing. I don't know if you, Scott, if you want to take a few seconds to talk about that and why you're excited about building that. But
yeah,
I obviously am extremely excited.
yeah. And I am too. I just express my excitement in different ways than you do. But yeah, I
Good.
think, oh, yeah, too much energy from me over here. That's why we need a wall separating us. So I think the key to success here is what we talked about early on here, is focus on what you're good at. There are robots that are very well tested and very good at specific things. They can do tasks efficiently, accurately, and safer, right? Safety is a big part of this as well, but quickly and safely and cheaply specific things. And then there are other things they hardly do well at all. Kayaks, right? We like to use the kayak example.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard thing to ship. And
Yeah.
so if we build a robotic warehouse, our first customer sells kayaks, we have failed completely. And so really focusing in on the direct consumer space where the goods are small and relatively light, they're going in the poly mailers, these sorts of things we can do cheap and efficiently and with a very high level of accuracy. And it takes away the bad part of the sort of labor, the things people don't want to do, the standing at a desk
Mhm.
and just putting a thing in a bag and putting a label on and putting another thing in a bag, right? Like those types of things.
Or also retrieving the items from the
Yeah,
walls of
climbing up
store.
and lifting something heavy and throwing out your bathrobe.
Mhm.
All of the things that are not fun about this. And now it's a desk job. Now it's you're a robotics operator and you're sitting there
Yes.
and you're managing a robotic system and you're helping, you're assisting, right? We've talked a little bit about the vision systems, and sometimes a person will have to interject and help it identify an object or something, right? So
Mhm.
now your job is assisting AI and robotics and working a desk and not climbing a ladder and lifting a heavy thing. So it's a different type of labor. It's a skilled labor. It's a salary job. It's not just your find some temp labor for the week job. And we can capacity plan much better. We know our capacity limits much
It's also
better. And
24/7.
yeah, and we can operate with a type of, yeah, the 24-hour cycle. Obviously, you can have multiple shifts, and we will have multiple shifts in these sites as well. But yeah, a lot of things that we can really do well and focusing. And that was like looking back on what was so great about Airhouse and remembering
Right.
that when you start to see, oh, right now, our initial price estimates, we're going to be saving people a ton of money, a huge amount of money. And then if a year from now, 2 years from now, we look at the books and all of a sudden our prices are creeping up and we're starting to have to hire a lot of people to do manual stuff because the robots can't do a lot of we are making mistakes. And so
Yeah.
being able to continue to adapt in a very emergent industry, right? Like we look at where the robotics world is today and we look at where the robotics world was 3 years ago and what an enormous change in what's a big deal, what are they good at, what's still trying to be figured out today versus even a couple of years ago.
Yeah. It's
Stay on
remarkable.
top of that. You gotta see and evolve, and you gotta be thinking ahead, going to the shows, seeing what's new, seeing how you can incorporate that into what we're trying to do, make good choices, right? That's going to be part of this too, but you got to move on from mistakes. And I think that that's like my biggest theme is just like move on from mistakes. Like it seemed like we thought that if we just tried a little harder sometimes,
Yeah.
that we could overcome. And sometimes you can. And I think that there are plenty of success stories that were try a little harder and overcome in the
Well,
business world,
and
of course.
clear, we tried the heart literally down to the
Yeah.
bone at Airhouse.
Yeah. And I loved our team at Airhouse. I think that I loved every person that we worked with, and I know they gave it everything they had.
Yeah.
And I would never want to take anything away from the team. I think it was really just, we weren't being enough self-reflective of what was working, what wasn't working. And I think,
Before we get on that, I just want to, so let's talk about the Airhouse failure in a second. I really do believe that. So right now we're going through a paradigm shift, and obviously Scott as CTO and chief AI officer. I don't know what do you call yourself. You're at the
that, but
you're at the front lines of this massive revolution of what knowledge workers are getting in AI, right? Like today you use Claude and you use JetBrains and you use like all of these other tools that make you maybe 50 or 75% more productive yourself. Like today we are a team of four. Scott is the only actual programmer. I think I've committed probably 10 lines of code that he may have already not used, but
oh, you got code in our code base, man.
okay.
You're,
So
you're an official contributor.
I have some code in there, but only because of Claude. And so we're going through a really massive shift in knowledge workers being just like super powered with AI, and it's affecting software, and it's affecting creative people, and it's affecting like a lot of other industries. But my prediction is that the physical AI is going to have a much more profound impact on the entire economy. If you think about it for a second, Amazon has 750,000 people that are dedicated to fulfilling items. And they also do have a lot of automation in their warehouses. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to even cut that in fractions because they bought Kiva. Kiva was great and at the time, but now we're working on the latest technologies and all that. And so like my belief is that all of these industries that use like actual physical like labor are going to be completely changed. Like you even look at easy example, McDonald's, right? You can now go to a kiosk and you can order something. Seems simple, but that eliminates one or two jobs or something like that. But you could see that a lot of these things, and AI specifically, I think that the manufacturing industry has got it really like they are on the probably bleeding edge of that. And I think that fulfillment is going to be next, obviously, super biased, but we're all going to have to be living in this world that like people are not like sewing things anymore. They're not going to be producing these like these things that just are very monotonous. Anything that's going to be very monotonous is going to be taken over by a
A little bit
robot. So
something that you do over and over. I don't know how much you want to or talk about the rest of the team, but right, we bring somebody in who's sold a successful business that did painting cars, and you've got a task that you're going to do 1,000 times a day, 5,000 times a day, whatever it is, the big factory, the same thing. Move over here, spray across, move over here, spray across. And those are the kinds of things 10 or 15 years ago that were easy to automate. It's a repetitive motion that you're just going to do the exact same thing over time. And I think that to build on what you were saying about how it's going to evolve, it will be interesting to see because we are investing heavily in the sort of repetitive motion tasks. We're taking
yes,
the picking action and the packaging action and trying to create automation around those. And this sort of physical AI evolution, the speculative side of things, are a robot that you can just ask it to do something that it doesn't know how to do and it can figure it out, right? That's your end game of the whatever, pick your sci-fi, your favorite sci-fi, where you can just ask a robot to go make me some breakfast and it can figure out how to do that. And it doesn't feel like we're there yet, right?
we're
And I
not.
think that there's a
We're
lot of
not.
companies that are hoping we're close. We see that a lot in the warehouse industry. I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to
the
talk
humanoid
about
industry, it honestly, like I use the example for all of the listeners, and I don't even know if you know this, Scott. The number one robot in the world is the Roomba,
yeah, that tracks.
and it's for a specific task. It doesn't do everything,
Yeah.
and it doesn't look like a human that
Yep.
is literally has a vacuum in its
Yep.
arm.
Yep.
It's designed for a specific task. So I think that before humanoids, which I'm very like, I think that eventually they will be a thing, but I think before that, there's going to be task specific things that are just going to completely change our lives. Just like the dishwasher did, right? You don't have a fucking robot that's going to be like scrubbing a dish and putting it away. You have a dishwasher, you have you have laundry, you have specific things that do specific things. And that translates also into the industrial applications as well. And that's what we are going to be doing for fulfillment. We are not going to have humanoids that are going to
Yeah.
be doing things. We are going to, and we're not going to give away any of our trade secrets on here, but we're going to be doing things that are very industry specific around certain size and weight of items and different fragility and all of those things to make things be lower cost, higher throughput, all of those different things.
I have a very strong memory of watching a video kind of early on in this most recent journey of a humanoid robot in a warehouse picking up a
Oh
box
my God.
and walking across the floor and like setting it down. And if you're building a robot to replace a person doing a thing, like the human body is not inherently specialized in anything,
No.
lift holding, or, like we're not a specialized organism in any of these sort of tasks. And so to create a robot that emulates a person with all of the sort of shortcomings, if we might say, of a person, you're artificially impeding this robot's ability to do something
Hmm.
when the sky's the limit. If you're building something from scratch, if you're making a robot, make it good at one thing. The Roomba is good because it's a small little disc that can go under furniture and can get into tight
Hmm.
spaces. If the Roomba was as tall as a person and it had to bend over to vacuum, you've got a terrible robot. And you've got to think about the task and specialize in the task. And then you go from just replacing one person doing one thing with really replacing an entire process. And that's what's so neat about some of these, the industrial side of things. And now the
Yeah.
logistics side is we've
Yeah.
got robots that can do 10 times as efficiently what a person can do. And now we're actually seeing efficiency gains. We're actually making something
Massive.
that's better than what we had before, and not just a robot doing the same thing we had before, which is already going to be more expensive. And I don't know, it gets into the, I don't know, call like the ethics of just if you build a robot to
Yeah.
replace a person, then I don't know, you just replaced a person. But if you define a new process that's
Right.
more efficient
Right.
and safer and better than we had before,
Yeah.
now we're more efficient and we're safer than we were before. And we've actually improved something instead of just taking a person's job away from them. That's a pretty clear distinction, and something that I think as the workforce evolves, we talk a lot
Yeah.
about the Industrial Revolution and what it meant to people
Hmm.
as technology came and began to change what jobs people were doing and stuff. And we're not looking to ruin people's lives, right? What we're doing is we're looking to make things safer, make things more efficient. And it really opens up. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to talk about. You mentioned Amazon and what FBA looks like, the opportunities that this presents to the broader sort of direct consumer space, because Amazon has such a stranglehold right now. And this is an
Lower
opportunity to
prices,
empower,
faster delivery. Yeah.
yeah, bring this technology to the wider market, bring this high tech stuff to shrink the gap between what Amazon can do with 1 million employees
Hmm.
and what a typical 3PL can do in their own small spaces. So lots of,
Yeah. So let's end that our promo for our next company on there. And for the last 15 minutes, if you've lasted on for the first 45 minutes, you're obviously wondering what happened with Airhouse. So let's dive deeper into what happened with Airhouse and why it didn't ultimately succeed. I'll give you my version and also quick highlights. Raised $23 million in venture capital, 40 employees or so, had dozens of different 3PL partners. We were doing, we were supposed to be ending based on the customers we signed at the end of 2024 at an actual $10 million annualized revenue run rate. So that's actually revenue to the company. And you are thinking to yourself, how the fuck did this company go out of business if you guys were doing so good? And the answer really was we started churning customers and we started churning our largest customers. And that was for a number of reasons. So one of the reasons were they potentially were getting better deals with 3PLs. Another, which I think that this entire kind of 4PL system breaks down with is that you are inherently reliant on the individual warehouse. And so we had a lot of warehouses that, and also one specific warehouse that they had our biggest brands in, that they literally were just fucking up so much. And we had probably too much concentration in revenue with probably our top three customers. And so when you lose two or even three of them, your revenue shrinks pretty dramatically. And so that's my thought on what happened. And I'd love to hear, Scott, what you thought about why Airhouse ultimately failed, or also, do you think that model could work in another way?
There's a lot of questions to go through. In general, obviously, we were on that same ride together.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is very self-evident, and I think that it ties into where we began with, if you look at our biggest customers, we were less of a good match for them at the end of
Hmm.
Airhouse than we were for our small to medium-sized customers. And I think,
That's true.
a real stumbling points, and as you look back with a little bit of regret, we had a real great leadership meeting a year and a bit before Airhouse failed, and we talked about what our ideal customer looked like. And we looked at all the customers that we had, and we talked about what was working well, who was happy, and who was unhappy. And we had said, hey, the customers who are happy are the small to medium sized brands who
Hmm.
are really helping. And I remember I spent a lot of time talking to our existing customers and a little time talking to prospective customers, and understanding what people were happy with and what people were unhappy with. And we had a lot of really happy customers. And it was tough at the end. We took a lot of flack from a lot of people. Some of them didn't have any business taking swings at us, but we got a lot of feedback from people there. And I think that we really were chasing a dream there at the end. We talked to these brands doing 200K a month, and we'd think to ourselves, man, we just need to sign one big brand and everybody
200,
stays.
so just to be clear, 200K in orders per month, which an order table top line typically is like 12 to $13. So we're talking about $1 million plus
Yeah.
gross revenue brands a month.
And like, that absolutely would have saved us, but there was no reason a brand like that would ever want
Hmm.
or PA. And so
Hmm.
that I think that I believed, and I still believe, that Airhouse could have been a successful business. I don't think it has the top side potential that the current business does, but I think that you can make the 4PL model work within the current space. And that's a big caveat too, because I think that the 3PL industry is going to start changing dramatically over the next 10 years as automation continues to grow.
Yeah.
And I hope that we're a huge part of that. But I
The
do
leader,
believe
you mean?
we brought a ton of value to the 3PLs. We brought a ton of value to a particular size and type of brand. And I think that was true for the entire life of Airhouse. But I don't even really think it was ambitious. I think that at some point we lost sight of who was really the best for us. And
Hmm.
we were chasing some dreams. We continued to go up market over the course of Airhouse's history. And greedy is an unfair way to say it, but like, you sign these bigger deals and you see those bigger monthly checks and go,
Pin those down.
man, yeah, let's get a couple more of those in here. Let's get an even bigger one in here. And
Yeah, that closes our quarter. Like,
yeah, and it's real nice that the guy signed one deal here and I'm done.
yeah.
But we never signed those deals. And so we fell into this trap of we're chasing a dream, and
Hmm.
losing sight of what was important, and what was making us successful as a business. And yeah, I think that's a pretty big shame there. And then there's some self-inflicted wounds. And I think that
Yep.
we had a very complex billing system and with all the best intentions, right? We wanted transparent billing.
Yeah.
We wanted to get the exact
Change the
cost.
industry. Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to know exactly what this package cost to ship. And we wanted to take our little markup and then be very clear with our customer what that cost was. But it turned out that because there was so much manual process. They got to go track down this or whatever. We'd be 6 months waiting for a final invoice from our,
Hmm.
partners. And that means that we're 6 months waiting to send an invoice to our customers. And that's a terrible billing cycle. And that's unfair to our customers and falls into the same sort of camp of, if there was a little more direct communication, maybe they could have sorted some of that out. And there was plenty that we could have done on our side to smooth that over as well. But at the end of the day, we were the architects of our own demise by trying to be so transparent with the billing and so detailed in the billing.
Yeah.
And
Uh, I think you're being a little too hard on us. I ultimately do think that the model is flawed. I think relying too much on other partners that if it was purely technology partners, I think that it'd be different, but relying so much on individual like 3PLs, individual managers, and then individual people to actually provide the actual service that customers expected of you. I actually take a different stance. I don't actually believe the 4PL model is a model that people should go after because it really I
it's
just
not
don't
market
see it
segment,
where
right? We were not just 4PL, but 4PL for the direct consumer
sure.
e-commerce world. And that's a segment of the 3PL space that is not really, it doesn't have as much attention, I would say,
Yeah,
on the larger sort of distribution stuff, right? A lot of the 3PLs that we were working with had a heavy reliance on shipping full containers, doing cross dock,
sure.
all the big stuff. And the e-commerce side was the afterthought. And of course, this is 2018, whatever, right? So we're pre-COVID, still not that it was an emerging market, but obviously e-commerce is something that has continued to grow dramatically over the last 6 years, 7 years now. So it's a tough little market segment.
And to be clear, I do want to shout out our partners because we had a lot of amazing partners and we had really small amazing partners, really great mid-market partners. I wouldn't say the enterprise partners were great, but there are really great operators and great 3PLs out there. I've tweeted about this and I have this on my LinkedIn as well, but I think that what happens is that so if you are a very small brand, I definitely would recommend you go to some of these smaller boutique 3PLs. They could offer you really great service. They're typically owned and operated by the actual person that owns the 3PL. You can reliably count on them for really great service. But as you grow as a brand, you're going to outgrow them and you're going to get into this mid-market and then eventually enterprise like 3PL side of things, which like the enterprise 3PL side of things, if you think about even the ShipBobs or the Seacos or and the Shipmonks or whoever else, a lot of them either they outsource, they are a 4PL. I know ShipBob is a 4PL, or they've actually acquired a number of smaller 3PLs. So I know that both Seco and Shipmonk do this. And what that causes is that you have multiple systems, you have multiple management structures, and it causes a fucking shitstorm in a very low margin business as it is. And so, as if you are a small business, you're looking to stay small, go to a fucking boutique 3PL. They're going to make
They'll
your,
value you, right? I mean, it's all like proportional. If
yeah,
you've got a small business, you work with a small business and you are an important partnership with them.
yeah,
If you're a small business and you go to Seco, you're nothing to them.
yes,
And that's the reality of every business space, right? If
yeah,
you represent some fraction of a percent of revenue, you don't get the attention that a bigger company is going to get.
right.
So you've got to choose your partner carefully, work with somebody who is, like we've been saying for this whole hour, well suited to your type of product. If you're a boutique, high touch, custom packaging, lots of care needs to go into the packaging and shipping of your goods, You work with a 3PL that has the resources and the
Hmm.
interest to handle that kind of stuff for you, and they will do a great job for you. If you go to a big 3PL and you want them to do all this custom stuff, they're either not going to or they're not going to do it well because it's not their specialty. It's not their wheelhouse. And you've got to find somebody where it is their wheelhouse and you'll be successful. We
Right.
know a ton of 3PL operators, and I think we had great relationships with almost all of them, right? We all were doing our best. We were all trying to do a thing.
Hmm.
And yeah, I guess we slightly different opinions on kind of where the 4PL model falls apart.
Yeah.
It's certainly very maligned in kind of the broader industry. I think that we took a lot of flack as we were going under there, but it's tough because the 3PLs want the direct relationship too.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think let's end on, so I get 2 points, and sorry, Scott, that's all the points. You get 0 points here because there's some things I'm going to say that you probably won't like. As we are going down, and we do have the majority of our listeners are first time founders. The absolute worst thing as a founder is for other founders to call you out when you have failed the business. And we got so much of that. We had so many of our competitors just rejoicing in, oh my God, I got this customer email. And we did everything we possibly could. We set our customers up with the best partners we could. We did everything, and especially given the tight timeline that we had. And also, to be clear, at the end of the day, we were trying to raise more money because we still believed in it. And literally came down to, it's this time we didn't raise money. Here is the exit path. We had no other option. But the vultures in this industry, and I will never forget any of your fucking names, and I will take all of your customers. It is disgusting what other startups and how we were trying to be. We're in competition with you, but also we are all startups, and just the negativity and how could you do this to your customers and all this. And the second that came out, I
and it
put
was
out a
nonsense
post.
too. There
Hold
were
on, you can't
all
talk,
these
Scott.
people kept
You can't
saying
you can't talk, Scott. I'm on a rant here. No, I'm sorry. You can.
they kept saying this stuff. They're like, "Oh my god, like no packages are going out, and these guys are all going out of business." That wasn't none of that was true.
None of that was
You're
true.
just making this stuff up, and
No.
it's guys, come on now. We're all trying to do the best by our customers here, and it wasn't perfect, and it was a terrible situation, but no packages were lost in the transition, and everybody ended up on their feet and shipping the stuff they needed to ship.
And
Yes.
also, I will note that for the founders listening, like the majority of you will fail your startup, and you'll go through this, and it's really tough, and you need to do what is best for your customers. And I think that we did what is best for our customers and our partners and everything, given our financial situation and everything like that. But for other startups to take swings at you, I know who you are, and we are going after you, and we are coming after you with robots, and you better be ready. And that is what we are going to end this podcast on, unless you have anything else to say, Scott. I know.
Skynet is becoming self-aware. Heaven's coming after you with his robots.
We know
That's
who you are, but also I know the other 3PL operators that offered great, like amazing support in the background. They didn't call us out. They're like, how can we help? Do you need help with customers outside of
it's a
calling
good
us out
industry.
publicly?
There's a lot of good collaboration industry.
There is.
There's a lot of it's a customer-centric industry, and there's a lot of real, genuine, good operators out there who want their customers to be successful. They know that their customer success is their success. And yeah, it's not a sexy industry. We're shipping packages, but it's a good
But
industry.
with
with
robots, it is. And
good
as we
community.
grow, we will be hiring.
Yeah. Gonna need to hire at some point here.
All right, let's end it on that. Scott, as always, amazing to work with you. I don't know how you put up with all my shit. Hopefully you put up with my shit for another 8 years at least. And thanks everybody for listening to hopefully this entertaining episode, and catch everybody later. Bye bye.